Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy swatted away a very ridiculous question by a Washington Post reporter named Meryl Kornfield, who asked if he supported white supremacy. Why did she even ask this? Well, Ramaswamy received the endorsement of former Congressman Steve King of Iowa, and that endorsement might actually help him in Iowa. So let's take a listen to that exchange.
Do you condemn white supremacy and white nationalism?
I mean, who are you with? It's a Washington Post. All right, so potato, okay. Of course, I condemn any form of vicious racial discrimination in this country. But I think that the presumption of your question is fundamentally based on a falsehood that really is the main form of racial discrimination we see in this country today. Institutionalized racism is institutionalized racial discrimination that we see that doesn't come from somehow discriminating against people on the basis of some tenet of white supremacy. It's based on affirmative action.
So the reporter asked Ramaswamy, quote, "Do you condemn white nationalism and white supremacy?" Ramaswamy very carefully chose his words in responding to this person. And I think he kind of did us proud. And by us, I mean Republicans. Just to back up a little bit, why would the endorsement of Steve King necessitate a renunciation of white supremacy? And the reason is because Steve King was kind of bullied out of Congress. He was always kind of on the right wing. He's also a strong Christian, so he has religious beliefs as well. And ultimately, he lost his committee seats due to something he said that was considered controversial. Also, if you look at his Wikipedia page, he criticized George Soros, and the ADL considered that anti-Semitic, which is kind of funny. I mean, you see this all over the place. People who criticize George Soros like too hard, you're not allowed to criticize him. But it's like, George Soros, I know it's kind of a meme and everybody, but he does actually donate like millions of dollars, hundreds of millions to the American political scene. So if you're not allowed to talk about him, like, that's kind of weird. So anyway, that was one of the weaker reasons why Steve King got in trouble. But here's a quote from 2019 when Steve King was talking to the New York Times. He said, "White nationalist, white supremacist, Western civilization. How did that language become offensive?" And that was really where he got himself in trouble. He kind of stepped in it there, frankly. He really did not say that very artfully, in contrast to Ramaswamy, who expressed something very mainstream, something that people of different races can kind of get on board with. I mean, Ramaswamy obviously himself is Indian. And maybe that's why he's like a good kind of spokesman, because you know, maybe that fends off some kind of criticism that he's racist, maybe not. But the key point is that Ramaswamy is smart and he thinks on his feet. Steve King, on the other hand, like, when I look at Steve King's statement, I interpret that as he's trying to say, how did white become a pejorative? But instead he ended up looking like he was defending white supremacy, and that's a bad look. But nonetheless, Ramaswamy took his endorsement, and he's kind of wearing it proudly. And then, predictably, he's getting backlash, but he's handling it. After this exchange, Ramaswamy posted the following on X a couple days ago. "After Steve King announced he was endorsing me, predictably, a lame reporter from WaPo tried to get me to play the game of, quote, denouncing white supremacy, while she refused to actually define white supremacy, which in recent years encompasses concepts like punctuality and the written word. I refused to play along with her game." That is such an important point because, you know, some people fall into this trap that, like, no one is for white supremacy. I don't think I've ever met anyone that is for white supremacy. But first tell me, what is white supremacy? Okay? And so Ramaswamy, by all accounts, unless you're that journalist, Meryl Feld something, unless you're her, you pretty much are on board with what he said. And I like the way that he said it. Here's another tweet from Ramaswamy. I have this embedded in an article on my website, michaelmcarablog.com. Ramaswamy tweeted, The media endlessly hyped stories about white supremacy and extremism in the US military for years. Was it true? No. It was a total joke with no basis in fact. In fact, the Biden administration commissioned a report that found extremism was non existent, and then they shamelessly tried to hide that. So I think what Ramaswamy's point is that talking about white supremacy is kind of a boogeyman that the media likes to use, that it's very divisive, obviously, because it makes people of the other races think that, yeah, you can say white supremacy is the problem, but that's kind of a thin line between just white people. So it's fairly toxic message to put out there. Of course, there are isolated incidents of racist shooters, but there's also racist shooters that aren't white. You just don't hear about it. And I don't really want to, I don't want that to be really my focus in life, but unfortunately, that's what this reporter, Meryl Kornfield, is kind of bothering Ramaswamy about right now. And as for Meryl Kornfield, she is your standard liberal, naive white woman who is impervious to any other set of facts than the ones that she's kind of learned and repeated. She looks like a young reporter, and you kind of the type. Enough said. My name is Michael McCara. Thank you so much for listening. You can check out my blog at michaelmccarablog.com. In the description, you can find my Twitter handle. Follow me on Twitter. And finally, and most importantly, like and subscribe to my channel. That is to say, like this video.
I've only heard what love can do, and now I'm getting love from you. Make your vows, make your